Call to order the December meeting of the Broadband Authority. And our first item of business is to approve the Broadband Authority minutes. I hope each of you's got a copy. There is a copy available. We need a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried, Madam Clerk. And our first item is Mr. Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple little updates that I'd like to give you relative to the fiber projects that we've been working on primarily with Shentel for our broadband project. And then kind of the remainder of the meeting, I'll turn over to the group from BrisNet and Blue Ridge Towers to talk about the fixed wireless component of our project and some of the change orders that are being requested and kind of next steps. So just kind of in summary, we have been, our broadband plan talks about extending fiber wherever we can and also extending fixed wireless to those areas that are a lot harder to reach in the county. And so right now I'm focusing on the fiber piece of it. And so as you may recall, we've partnered with Shentel over the past couple of years as the primary cable provider in the county to extend their network in several areas of the county. And so going back to 2019, we initially went into a grant with the Tobacco Commission with Shentel, $650,000 if you recall, and that was really to extend about 30 miles of fiber in the county, and they were really in 4 different areas reaching about 460 households. And so I'll give you some updates on where we're at with those. The first body application that was approved also had a component of fiber to it, and that was the Old Salem School Road project in the Union Hall District, and that was to extend about another 6.5 miles of fiber to reach about 200 households and businesses in that area. I'll point out that we're expecting to hear, hoping to hear some good news on our next body application that was submitted for the 2021 cycle. On the fiber side, that was to extend another 30 miles of fiber in the county and reach about another 550 households in 9 different areas of the county. And I guess I would just point out that all of these activities, so if we can get the next grant, that's about close to 70 miles of fiber that we've been able to extend at no cost to the county. If we're able to secure the additional grant funding, all of it has been paid for by the private company and matched with state funds. And so going back to the first project, the 2019 Tobacco Commission, this is just a breakdown of those projects. Burnt Chimney, Wadesboro, Walnut Run, and Windy Gap were those primary projects, and you can see kind of the amount of fiber, the number of units here, and kind of where it is in status. And so Wadesboro was a small project out towards Ferrum. That was completed many months ago, actually. Walnut Run in the Hardy area has now been completed as well, and customers are being actively connected. Windy Gap, part of it is complete, and they're still working on parts of the Windy Gap Drive project there. And then Burnt Chimney was the largest project, and so it's the one that's still taking time to complete. That's the one that really extends the fiber from Hardy Road to 116 along Route 122. And so construction of that one is expected to begin next month. Yes, sir.
Steve, when they get through with Windy Gap, how many homes will be able to hook up?
We're anticipating about 114.
And then, but it's, how many up there altogether? It's a little over 200.
I don't know.
I forgot that. We talked about that number.
It was Cooper's Cove and Windy Gap, and then, of course, we have that other subdivision.
Saddle Street, Saddle Trail, and
Yeah.
all those others that are coming too, but
That other portion of Windy Gap, kind of on the the Franklin side, I guess, of Windy Gap is one that we're looking at for a future grant to also reach there.
I hadn't heard anything. I'm sure you may have talked to them since I have, but
We're meeting with the HOA after the first of the year to talk about some exceptions that the HOA may be willing to
let me know.
go with. So that other project, is kind of moving forward, but that'll be a future grant project that we'll be looking at for that one.
They're not wanting to lift them restrictions.
Well, I think
They're
they
starting
may
to-
be now, yeah.
They
Yeah.
starting to wake up a little bit.
I think so, because I think they really want to see the,
When them neighbors start talking about their internet and what's going on when they out walking the dog, that's when things is gonna change.
that's true. That's true. The 2020 Vadi project is the Old Salem School project, Old Salem School Road. Again, 6.5 miles of fiber, about 200 units, going all the way to the Magnum Point Marina at the end of the road. Construction is completed and customers are being activated now and will continue through the month and into next year as well for that project. So that project is essentially complete. Customers are getting access to service. These are the projects we submitted for the next round of fiber projects, the 2021 application. 9 different areas across the county, approximately $1.5 million we're asking for from the state. And again, we're hoping by the end of the month to hear some sort of decision on whether or not we were successful in receiving that funding or not. And finally, on the CARES, on the fiber, I just wanted to share kind of an update on the CARES funding. If you recall, a couple months back, we approved some CARES funding, about $250,000 to go towards some broadband projects. And those were kind of 2 areas. One was 3 residential projects that Chantel had identified that were a need and citizens were requesting. And those were projects that we were assured from Chantel could get completed by the end of the year to meet that CARES funding deadline. The other was extending fiber to 2 tower sites to help us with the fixed wireless project that we have going on. And so these were the residential areas that we had submitted for Chantel to extend their fiber. This is the Retreat subdivision, which is it's not totally built out, but it seems to be a subdivision that is growing quickly. And so we did submit that one to extend the Chantel network through there. Cedar Bay Road was another area. So Chantel did come down Cedar Ridge Drive there at the top, but it stopped. And it didn't get these people. So we had these households here that in essence had no access to any kind of internet. And so that was a project, basically an extension that Chantel was able to do. And then the final one in the Gills Creek district was filling in a gap. Chantel had coverage for this area on Parkway Drive, and they had coverage in this area, but the area in green was kind of left out. And those folks, again, really had no access to internet. So we were hearing from these folks that had school children, had people working from home and so forth. And so they were asking for a way to try to get this done. And we used CARES money working with Chantel. I'm happy to report that all 3 of those projects are complete. And all those have people signed up and getting service. And so I've just included a few quotes here because I think it's just good for you guys to see some of the appreciation that some of the citizens had expressed, that, we're so thankful now that our children have access to the internet and we have access to work from home. So these were just a couple of them that we did hear from that had some, positive things to say and just appreciation to the authority for, making those funds available and helping out to get that internet there. The other that I mentioned was the fiber extension. So we've been working with Chantel to get it to Scruggs Tower off of Blue Water Drive. That's an existing county tower that has no fiber access, but now with fiber being there, that is going to help us in a couple different areas. It'll help us with our public service, our public safety radio coverage. It'll help us with our fixed wireless with the BrisNet folks, to provide a more reliable source of internet rather than a microwave backhaul. And it'll also help us in marketing that tower for additional cellular providers, so the Verizons and the Sprints of the world. if they know that tower has fiber, that's one of the things that attracts them to those sites. The other is Fork Mountain Fire Station. So we are working with Shentel and also working with Mid-Atlantic Broadband to extend fiber to the station for two reasons. One, to provide a public Wi-Fi hotspot, but also secondarily is to get it to the new tower site that's being built there. And again, for the same reasons, that'll benefit us for public safety. It'll benefit our fixed wireless project, and it'll benefit future carriers that may locate on that structure. And so with the CARES Fund, as mentioned, this authority had granted approval to use $250,000 of CARES funds to help with these projects. We actually submitted to the state to try to get the state to help pay for that through the CARES funding that was made available that way. We were able to get $98,500 from the state. So that basically took $100,000 off of our books, so to speak, out of our CARES money, and we're able to use the state CARES money for that. We will still need about $150 of our local CARES money to cover the rest of that. But bottom line there is we've got it all covered through some source of CARES funding, and we were able to get the state to help us with some of that. So that's kind of a real quick update on the fiber parts of the project. I'll be happy to answer any questions relative to the fiber, and then if not, we can kind of shift over to the fixed wireless project that we've been doing with BrisNet and Blue Ridge Towers. They're here to give an update on project status. And then there's also several change orders that are being requested to the contract. And we'll have some discussion about those change orders, the reasons for those change orders, and then what we would be looking for at the end of the meeting is action on those items. There is a handout, I think that Madeline had given you with a revised schedule is the big piece of paper, and then there's a brief summary of the change orders that are being requested as well. And so we'll cover that through the presentation, but any questions on the fiber part I can answer or address before we move into the next part of the meeting?
Are those fiber optics going alongside the road down there on 122?
Yes and no. Some of it is that Facebook fiber. So out towards Lake Watch and closer to the bridge, that's actually the Facebook fiber. But between Hardy Road and 116, if you see some activity through that section, that's probably, you're probably seeing some of that Shentel work. Although I think the bulk of that Shentel work will probably start after the first of the year.
They're really putting stuff in down there now.
There's
and
a
just
lot
a side, sorry.
There's a lot of activity down there
A
today.
lot of activity.
Yeah,
They're
going on.
pulling.
and just a side note on that, I did reach out to the governor's office about the Facebook fiber because I know there's been a lot of folks asking about it. Up to this point, we've been told that it's not accessible to us, that we can't tap that fiber. Folks that live along that stretch of fiber are not going to be able to access that. I reached out to the governor's office to see if they had been in conversation with them at all about this. They indicated yes, but they also indicated they're having continued conversations with them. And so we're hopeful that, maybe there will be some green light there that some of our folks, especially out in the Callaway area, will actually be able to benefit from that fiber at some point in the future. But I guess all I can say now is stay tuned. We'll see if that opens up at all and we have any opportunities there. Hopefully through the state level, maybe they have a little bit more leverage to make something happen. I guess two other things I'll point out on fiber real quick before we shift is we've been in conversation with both Citizens Telephone out of Floyd County and Cox Cable out of Roanoke County about providing some extended fiber into Franklin County. And so we know that Citizens already is going to be serving some Franklin County customers on the Walnut Knob area. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. I think that would be in the Blue Ridge District out towards the Parkway. There's an area about 1.5 miles that they'll actually be extending fiber. So those folks will actually get high-speed internet through Citizens Telephone, through the co-op activities that are occurring over there. We're working with them to see if there's other opportunities for some of those subdivisions along the Parkway there that maybe they could help pick those up, because in all honesty, it's going to be difficult for us to reach a lot of those folks all the way out by the Parkway. So the other area we're looking at is the end of Callaway Road that comes into Bent Mountain Road. Cox Cable is there at Bent Mountain Road, and so it's just a short hop under the Parkway to get down Callaway Road. So I've actually had conversations with Cox about initially extending about 1.5 miles down Callaway Road to pick up a dozen or two houses in that area. And so they're looking at that and they're evaluating that, and that could be a potential future grant opportunity where we look at working with Cox to provide some additional cable, internet, and phone services in that area. So we're kind of looking at other opportunities that might be available as well, and kind of trying to pursue those as we continue to build out the network.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Mr. Sandy, I just want to publicly thank you and your staff for the expertise and the time and commitment that you all have made. Those comments that you shared from citizens are just a small sampling of what I'm getting personally. It's a new day in the county with the work that you're overseeing, and so we thank you very much for that.
Well, I appreciate it. I know a lot of times you only hear the negatives, so I did want to share, some of the positive and make sure that people kind of understood that there are things that are happening. People are getting connected. Unfortunately, not everyone's getting connected at the same time, but, with following through our plan, we're hoping to continue to add people, to the network as we move along. So I appreciate that. And I don't know about expertise. I'm learning as I go as well. So let me transition now to the fixed wireless part of our build out that we've been working with BrisNet and Blue Ridge Towers on. We've got Anthony Smith and Sean Kai with us today, who are going to kind of give you some project updates. And I know you're familiar with those two. We've also have two other folks that you may not be as familiar with. I want to say Gopi. If I got that right, I'll let Anthony correct me if I'm wrong, and John Manning, two of the partners that have been working with BrisNet and Blue Ridge Towers on this project. And so those are the folks that we have with us today. And I think Anthony is going to come up and kind of do an initial overview of the work that BrisNet has been doing and where they're at kind of in the project. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that'll kind of lead us into a request for some change orders and the reasons for those and some of the justifications for those that we can have further discussion about. So, Mr. Chairman, unless there's additional questions, I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith to make his presentation.
Okay, I think that's fine. Thank you. Mr. Smith, it's good to have you with us.
Yes, and I hope you don't mind me temporarily removing my mask. I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be back. I think I want to start off by introducing two folks that are members of our team that you guys may not have ever heard of or met. And one will be John Manning. John is at BrisNet. And I want to explain our relationship. And we also have Gopi Sundram as well. As we, Blue Ridge Towers, began to get multiple contracts in different counties to build out the infrastructure, we saw the opportunity to create a WISP, and we were asked by a couple of counties would we be interested in creating a WISP. That WISP is called BrisNet. We founded BrisNet a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, and like anything, funding is critical to making a capital-intense business work. And so I went out and started to raise capital for BrisNet. And I came across Radius Capital, and Radius, not only did they have the money that we needed, they also had a tremendous amount of expertise. Their entire staff at Radius have tremendous background in telecom and broadband, fixed wireless, telecommunication construction. So through that partnership, I was not only getting money, but I was also getting additional expertise that would help us deploy a bigger, better network and, be a stronger company. And so these gentlemen, Gopi is in from Durham, North Carolina. John is from Durham as well, but he is here in the office with us probably 3 days a week. And our other partner, the CEO of Broadband Radius, of Radius Broadband Capital, is Tom Watt. And Tom Watts was here with us. He flew in from Manhattan yesterday. He spent the day yesterday and intended to be at this meeting, but the snow was on the way, and he had to get back to New York, so he switched his flight and is now at the Roanoke Airport waiting to get out of here. So he sends his regards. But I want to give the county some reassurance, and I'm a person who was not afraid to be transparent and put the facts on the table. I wanted you to have reassurance as we're at the beginning stages of our project that BrisNet is very well funded. And I've never been in a business where you have more money than you have projects, right? So that's where we are. And I don't know if it would be appropriate for one moment to ask Gopi if you would like to have a few remarks to the board and just speak on Radius and you and Tom's role.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, dropped my mask.
I hope it's okay for me to take my mask off.
Yes, sir.
First off, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here. At Radius, we've been doing this for a number of years. Both my partner and I, Tom and I, we have been doing telecom investments, telecoms operations, public-private partnerships, et cetera, I've been doing it for 20 years. He's been doing it for 30 years. His background is investment banking and management consulting in this space. My own background is I'm an engineer by trade, and I was a terrible engineer, so I decided to get into finance myself. Eventually ended up doing a bunch of public-private partnerships in telecoms. Over the last 7 years, I was in Europe doing this in Ireland, where we did something very similar, except we probably did it for, I want to say, about 90 counties, so the equivalent of Franklin's, but 90 times. In Ireland, over a period of 4.5 years, by partnering with folks like yourselves, local governments, the federal government, and various semi-state type utilities, we ended up building an end-to-end network system that we eventually sold back to the Irish Infrastructure Fund, which is partly funded by the government. And in the process, we covered something like 99% of Ireland's footprint. So much so that we could say pretty confidently, if anybody wanted a gig of network, we could provide a gig of uncontended service to 99% of the population area of Ireland. So I moved back to Cary, North Carolina, and when Tom and I started this, our goal was to replicate the same process on a larger scale in the States. And you are our anchor opportunity in that regard, and we are looking forward to doing everything we can to make sure you're a success, and we'll be a success too in the process. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
And I do want to do one thing. I want to draw a distinct line between BRT, Blue Ridge Towers, and BrisNet. I think some folks think we are one and the same company, but we're actually two separate entities. And kind of the tie that binds is that I founded both companies, but when I took on the equity partner, again, Blue Ridge Towers and BrisNet, two separate entities, but we fly in tandem on these public-private partnership deals that we're doing. So with that said, I will go to the slide if Steve has taught me well. All right. So right now, I do want to give you one slide on Bedford County. We received our certificate of substantial completion 2 weeks ago. So we have completed that project. There are 2 sites that still have some antenna installation and base station installation that need to be buttoned up and completed. But for all intents and purposes, we have completed the Bedford County project from a Blue Ridge Towers perspective. So the infrastructure is built and in place. And now the remaining work is up to BrisNet. And again, BrisNet, we're working hard to place the final 2 sites with antennas. But the construction and infrastructure part of the project is complete, and we did receive the certificate of substantial completion from Bedford a week ago. The next subject I'll touch on, which is something that Steve alluded to, that is the actual reason for the change orders, and it's a very good thing. When we started this project, I think I'd been working with Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Sandy, Mr. Burnett, probably 3 years now that we've been working on broadband in the county, at least 2 years before we were awarded the contract. At that time, as a company, we were not, CBRS is a licensed frequency. It was not available to us as of yet. So we designed initially the network for Franklin County with unlicensed spectrum, which would be the 900 megahertz and 5.8 frequency internet coverage. My partners went to the FCC 409 auction in June or July, and we successfully were able to purchase CBRS licensed frequency, not only for Franklin County and Bedford County, but for an additional 12 counties in Virginia. So that we now hold a CBRS license in 14 counties in the Commonwealth of Virginia. 13 or 14, Gopi? 15. 15. I was off by one in the wrong direction. 15 licenses in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which allows us to deploy stronger, better technology to serve the people. So the change orders that you will see are a result of a very positive thing, and that is us being able to acquire those very expensive licenses to be able to conduct the CBRS broadband service here in Franklin County. So that's a biggie for today. And here you'll see another slide on the CBRS, but we've covered that. Here is our heat map, and our heat maps are showing what our service area looks like under the CBRS coverage for the first 5 sites that we're about to start, which are co-locations. And John, would you like to speak to the slides, to the heat map?
So this map represents the first 5 tower sites in a 12-site network.
Sir, will you, yeah.
We engaged the equipment manufacturer, Cambium, to assist us in creating this map, which uses a rather sophisticated software tool that is proprietary to Cambium. It allows us to predict the number, I'm sorry, I keep doing that, the number of homes that we can actually reach with our spectrum. So if you will, each tower site is radiating or propagating our RF signal, i.e. wave particles, over the county. And I believe the map is set at a height of 17 feet. So at 17 feet and above, we connect to a signal with what we call a gain or degree of connectivity of 65 or 66, I can't see it, 68 or better. So as you can see, you have different colors. As the color gets darker, i.e. orange, the connectivity is stronger. If it's a little bit lighter, it's not as strong, but yet successful. So this tool also allowed us to, and we don't have it here, to pinpoint the number of rooftops, what I would call our first subscriber base. And we secured, I believe, 100 subscribers that we knowingly can connect to these tower sites through this tool. So we have, if you will, 500 rooftops or 500 potential subs, an established database, i.e. a doorbell to ring. The other beautiful, or the other aspect of this tool is that it allows us to pick the tower site to make the best connection. The CBRS spectrum is particularly powerful and travels a greater distance than, say, a 900 megahertz. So you have a stronger signal, faster speeds, and a greater throughput. But they also overlap. So we are able to pick the best selection for a particular subscriber to a tower site, or we may have 2 or 3 tower sites that we can connect to. So we can load balance the network, if you will. That's it. Gobi?
I just wanted to add on something to what John just pointed out. So this is a unique opportunity that we have. Sorry about that. This is a unique opportunity that we have. One of the things that we want to do is, and Steve and I briefly spoke about this before this meeting started. If we could get essentially a list of all the addresses in the county. We could go through the same exercise well ahead of time. So even before we built even the first tower, we can pretty much map out 30,000 premises or whatever it is that we have in the county by saying red, yellow, and green, and go after the greens and aggressively roll out the network. And it is, obviously it's in our interest, because the quicker we have, the more customers we have, the better off we are. We want to make money. And secondly, the faster they get onto our network, the better off we are, because we get to profitability sooner. And I think this would be in line with your policy objectives as well. So to the extent that we can collaborate on some of these things, which are low-hanging fruit, I think it'll make a massive difference to the viability of the project. I hope that helps.
I think we have a list of each house on each road in the county already prepared. And so I feel like Mr. Smith has it. Sean?
I think, well, what we're going to do, Mr. Mitchell, what Gopi is requesting is that we would get in touch with the GIS department, and that GIS data can be merged into this mapping software that we have for our network, and it will instantly qualify or disqualify every single resident in the county's GIS system. And so I think anytime you do a project, you have lessons learned. And one thing I learned from Bedford County is that we should focus on the customer first. We focused on the infrastructure project first and not per se the customer. But this go around, this project, we're smarter than we were on that one. And so we're really focused before we even get our first antenna up on how many subscribers that we can serve, because it helps the county meet its goal of getting its citizens internet, not in April or May or July or August of next year, but as these things go up, we've already got a rapid list of qualified households, where on the Bedford project, because the technology wasn't available to us, we had to build it, turn it on, and then go out and do a lot of field work at each residence to qualify or disqualify that residence. That's time consuming and it's very costly. It doesn't make your citizens happy. And, you know, we definitely at BrisNet want to be able to immediately give this GIS data to our engineers so that they can qualify and disqualify households so that we can hit the ground running and start connecting. But that's off subject. I'll keep going. Industrial Park, as you know, there's a tower. That Blue Ridge Tower was built in the county a little less than a year ago. We have secured a lease space on the tower at 150 feet. And we actually are working with Mid-Atlantic Broadband to bring the fiber to that location, and they are very close to terminating the fiber at the tower point. I would imagine we'd have that done before Christmas. And there are 5 sites that are our co-location sites on the project. It's not on this particular slide, but what we're doing is we're deploying the CBRS antennas on those co-location sites immediately. And because CBRS is new, and the equipment is in such high demand, the availability of it is just longer lead times, right? So we won't be able to get those antennas in our hand until sometime mid-February, but that's when we'll begin to install the antennas on the co-location sites.
And,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, if I may,
Yes,
that's
sir.
the industrial park, that's the site where I called you the other day and was talking about Bethlehem Road and Chaos Mountain. That's probably going to be the service there.
Yes, sir. If memory serves me correctly, I think you're correct.
Bethlehem Road is the one at the traffic light in Boone's Mill.
Sean, could you make a note of that location he's talking about?
Bethlehem Road back up towards Chaos Mountain.
Okay, we'll look at that, and I'll give you a firm answer through Steve in an email. Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll skip through. Burnt Chimney is one of our co-location sites for the water tank. Scruggs is a co-location. Grassy Hills is a co-location. And Tom's Knob is a co-location. So all 5 of these sites, the same story exists. Under Steve's leadership, he was able to get fiber to some of these sites that we were going to do microwave shots at, which makes the site perform much better and have more redundancy. And again, it's the same issue. We've ordered the equipment. There is about an 8 to 10 week lead time on antennas, especially with Christmas and New Year's holidays. But we intend to get those antennas in our hands mid-February and begin installing that equipment immediately. And the background work we're doing at BrisNet is to take that GIS data and flush out those customers. So as soon as we turn the site on, we're going to start installing all of those green customers immediately. Snow Creek, Mr. Mitchell's favorite site, we have filed for the building permit. I went ahead and ordered the tower for this site about 3 weeks ago. We just received the anchor bolts for that tower yesterday. And so we're prepared to start construction at Snow Creek immediately. So that's the update there. Sontag, same as well. We've got the anchor bolts in hand. Glade Hill, if you want to read through your pamphlet there, it's an 80-foot pole that will be at the elementary school. And then we also have the anchor bolts read as well. The Henry Volunteer Fire Department, we have the power is already ordered. It is a microwave site. I think Sean and Steve have worked out the lease with the fire department, correct? Do we have it signed, Steve? So we have the signed ground lease with the fire department, and we've also submitted for the construction permit. Same scenario with Fork Mountain. I won't bore you with reading the entire slide. Callaway, these are our new construction sites. And Sean, would you like to speak to the issue at Callaway? Yes, please, Dan.
So Callaway, we have a little brief NEPA SHPO issue. The Pamunkey tribe, the Indian tribe, is saying that in the future, the property next to the school is going to be a registered landmark for them. So therefore, they're contesting with the FCC, saying if we built a tower, it would be a visual effect or visual adverse effect. In essence, they're not saying no to the tower. They're basically going about in a nice way of saying, hey, we want you to donate some money to our tribe for preservation and reach a memorandum of understanding. And so that's what we're at.
One question, Sean.
Uh-huh.
Is the tribe still active at Callaway?
No, it's actually not a registered mark yet, but it's in the application process. So he's going to be adamant that we go through the process and ending with them.
And I guess my next question is, in here, who do you deal with when they're not active?
We deal directly with the FCC on this one.
Okay, thank you.
Westlake?
When should we expect the Callaway pool to start going up?
Well, again, the Callaway site, and I want to explain, when you build a tower, you have to order Phase 1, SHPO, and NEPA. And probably the most difficult hurdle is the 106 review, which means, are there any historic structures or landmarks nearby that the tower will create an adverse effect? And we have a third party that does the 106 application on our behalf. And in that 106 review process, all known Indian tribes that were in that area at any time, there has to be a letter sent from us to all of them, making them aware that the tower is going up. And they have 30 days to respond. And the only Indian tribe that responded on this one was the Pamunkey tribe. And, according to our consultants, the Pamunkey tribe is not even registered in that area at this point, but their application is in. So long as they even have an application in, they have a say-so. And you look for what's called a mitigating factor, basically how can we settle this? And since they're just now being acknowledged as being a tribe in this area, we have to do some type of concession. And it seems like we may end up having to donate to them anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000. And I don't know how they'll earmark it or what they'll call it, but that's typically the mitigation price when there's really no true artifacts or standing structure. So we're working on that process, and I think that we will have an answer on that by the middle of January, because that process is just long. All right. Westlake. Westlake is a 175-foot tower that we're building at the Westlake Commerce area directly across the street from the Booker T. Washington birthplace. And of course, we're dealing with National Park Services there. And National Park Services is, it's quite a wrestling match to get an approval out of them. And we've been talking to them for about a year and a half about this site, and it has come to a head. There will be a phone call, Ms. Smith and Mr. Sandy, I will ask you to participate in. It will either be Friday of this week or Monday of next week. Once we get confirmation from National Park Service, we will circulate the email so that you can be a part. And what we'd like you to do is just to voice the county support of that tower and how important that tower is to our project. So what we've been told is that, so long as we've got strong political support, the FCC is going to approve the tower, with or without the NPS's, National Park Service's blessing. But the National Park Service is not really against the tower. We went from proposing a 200-foot regular monopole to a 175-foot regular monopole to now 175-foot monopine, which is very interesting. It's be one of the first in our part of the state. It's like an artificial tree, and that's what we have on the table to be approved. I think Robin Snyder at National Park Services wants to see this tower decrease in height, but at 175 is really the lowest we can go without jeopardizing our ability to propagate a real frequency from that site. So we'll try to get that resolved with your help, Ms. Smith, sometime this week or next.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Mr. Smith, can I
Yes.
just ask you a couple questions? Am I understanding you correctly that the FCC is going to grant approval irrespective of the National Park Service?
They have the authority, they have the capability, and we need to arm them. If we're supporting this tower, we need to arm them with what they need to be able to do that. And one of the big things they need is political support from the locality. And if we have that, then there's a strong possibility that they will approve the tower. Because I, as a tower developer, have to prove to the FCC, who's the final say-so, that I've done everything I can to mitigate the adverse effect. And the adverse effect is, if you're standing at the cemetery at the Booker T. Washington Monument, you look across the street and you'll see the cell tower. But before you see the tower, you also see power lines and grand home furnishing. So our tower is not obstructing or creating any more of a view shed issue than those other two structures.
Yeah, because I can tell you, I've been on some conversations this week, and I am concerned about, there are varying opinions that I'm being privileged to
Right.
from the Friends of Booker T, which is essentially, the board, and Robin, and then the National Park Service. It's my impression that there is not a unilateral agreement on this site at all.
Right.
And that matters to me. And I understand that you need political will and political support to move ahead with the FCC. And I know that there's been a lot of work that's gone on over the last year and a half to appease and to ameliorate all of the issues that's going on. But that matters to me as these folks are my constituents, and this is a national treasure that's in my district. So I'm going to be interested to see how the phone call goes later this week or Monday.
Right.
Because I do have concerns, because my constituents have concerns.
Respectfully, would you mind voicing what you've heard in terms of what the strongest opposition, not the person, but the complaint that they have, what is the strongest opposition that they have against the
Generally
tower?
speaking, it's view shed. It's, it's line of sight. And, I thought when we first started this process, when I was involved at the initial point of it, that we were more unilateral in our thinking, and that there was agreement, that we were moving in the right direction. And I think over time, for whatever reason, that has dissipated, and I don't see a line of connection between the parties in this conversation, and that's very worrisome to me.
And I'd have to agree, because my initial letter that I received from Robin Snyder with the National Park Service, and all of my discussions, we can talk all we want, but when we put it on paper, it makes it real. And she actually put on paper to us that she was not adverse, she was not against the tower, and that she appreciated all that we were doing as a company to give her options to choose from, and that she was willing to work with us to find something that worked for the greater good. And she also said she had to talk to her folks in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So I think between her and I having some great options on the table and her going to Washington, D.C., something has changed. And I would say Mr. Timms, who's been there a lot longer than Robin, he covets that site more than she does, and I think he's probably more of an opponent of that site. But that site's critical to us for a lot of different reasons. But, you know, again, Friday, Monday, we'll have the call and hopefully come out positive. And trust me when I tell you this, there was an old saying my football coach would say, and it says, I'm Virginia born, Virginia bred, and when I die, I'll be Virginia dead. And that's the way I feel about everywhere I go to build a tower in the Commonwealth. I always try to pick the most architecturally congruent, least impactful structure possible. And I have done, this will be my third site, if we get it done correctly, that I've successfully navigated the waters of National Park Service. And, you know, it's definitely a delicate dance, and you have to take everybody's feelings into consideration. And I'm never a bulldog, and I'm always a big old ballerina, if you will, trying to make everybody happy. So we'll try to get through that Friday or Monday and see how it turns out.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll add to Ms. Smith. You know, I've expressed my support for you guys and Steve in this, and I want to see you guys do well in the county, but there is a lot of merit with what Ms. Smith is saying. I've had some people reach out to me as well. So I'm curious to see how Friday or Monday's conversation goes to see if the Friends of Booker T and the Park Service do come to agreement with you guys.
And I've never had the opportunity to speak with Friends of Booker T. They've been dealing directly with our consultants, just sending emails and letters.
Yeah,
But I would love the opportunity to meet with someone from their team one-on-one to kind of explain the process. And I think if they get a chance to really touch and feel what we're proposing to build,
I can probably make that happen for you.
I'd love to.
That needs to happen because they, you know, the president of that board, and she's here with us today, you know, it's important that they're at the table. And I know from a regulatory perspective, you're doing, and the parties that you're working with are all, you know, again, part of that regulatory process. But when it comes to gaining political buy-in, the Friends of Booker T. Washington are a very important part of the equation. And so I think that, you know, Mr. Mitchell and I would both very much encourage that discussion to be had.
Yeah, and we will make every effort to. I was not aware of them until about 3 weeks ago.
Are you kidding?
No, I wasn't aware of them. Robin or Tim, no one from National Park Service mentioned them to me. And it wasn't until my consultant received a letter from them that we even knew they existed.
Well, if you don't mind, Mr. Smith, I'd like to be party to a discussion or meeting or whatever takes place, if that would be
Absolutely.
all right.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Miss Barbara Board is sitting right behind you.
Hey, how are you? I thought you were a reporter getting ready to write a bad story on me. All right, okay, we'll talk after this. Yes, ma'am, pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I
Thanks, Ms.
appreciate
Smith.
it.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
Sites on air, March 2021 is when we intend to turn our first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sites live, and they're listed for you there. This is just a continuation of our schedule as we intend to turn these sites live through early and mid next year. And we'll put a question mark beside those two because they still have issues, real estate and zoning issues. And Steve, I don't know if you want me to back away and let you go over the change orders? You're probably better suited to do that than I. Any more questions for me? Or I can, after Steve makes his presentation? Either way.
I have one comment, Mr. Chairman. Anthony, I would suggest when you meet with the Friends of Booker T, you have a PowerPoint and you show them what that tree hole looks like, because those things blend in with the background. I've been in several cities where they have those, and they're really unobtrusive.
Right. I agree, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I think just to that point, this is the photo simulation showing that proposed monopine would be right here, this structure here. So just to your point, Mr. Carter, that's the photo simulation graphical depiction. Obviously, you know, it's not real life, but that's what it's intended to look like. I was wondering if there was another picture, but I think that's the same picture there. So in this picture, that's what you see, this structure here. And so there may also be possibilities and discussion about shifting it, maybe, you know, so it ends up, you know, behind this clump of trees or something like that. There may be some other alternatives in addition to looking at the height that might be, you know, worth discussing with both the National Park Service and the Friends of Booker T. So thank you for that update, Anthony. And it kind of leads us to way I've separated it is into 6 different requests for change orders that are kind of before us at the moment as part of the PPEA contract that we have with Blue Ridge Towers and Bristnet. And so I'll go through those, and you also have a copy of those at your desk. You can follow along if you'd like, kind of summarizing each one, and then kind of the authority action, the staff recommendation that we would be looking for those. So the first one is really just an additional set of engineering that has been done on some of the existing structures, our Grassy Hill structure that we own, our Tom's Knob structure that we own. They had gone to the engineers to get structural opinions and structural analysis on those to make sure that there were no issues with handling the additional antennas, but also to show us that there's opportunity for future co-locators for like the Scruggs Tower and so forth. So as those private companies may come looking to locate on those structures, we'll have that information available to them. And so with that, there's a change order requested for $4,300 in addition to our contract. And so staff has no objection to that, and what we would propose is approval of that coming from contingencies within the VADI grant. So in the grant, we had about roughly $220,000 of contingencies in there to cover items like this. So the recommendation from staff would be to approve that additional expense, and then we would request reimbursement from that contingency line item.
One question. Do we need to pass on these individually, or?
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman, if you want me to go through all of them and then consider each one separately. We can address them in order, and then if you're not comfortable with any of those, we can defer action. So it's kind of up to you and the authority how you'd like to handle that.
Are y'all okay with doing them one?
Yeah, if we're gonna do a one-on-one, I'll make a motion to approve.
Are you, Mr. Attorney, you okay with us doing one or all of them together?
Would we be acting on change order number 1?
Okay,
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
okay.
Make a motion to approve the $4,300 from the contingency funds.
Second?
Okay, any other discussion? If not, I don't think we need a roll call vote on this, do we? All in favor of item number 1? Yes?
Yes.
Those opposed? Item number 1 passes. We'll look at item number 2.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the second item, you heard a little bit of discussion earlier about the CBRS equipment. And so what that represents is a change in the contract that we have with Blue Ridge Towers and BrisNet, but also the contract with the state. As they mentioned, when the application was originally submitted and the contract was initially awarded, they didn't have the ability to use this technology and use these antennas. And so we've gone to the state, asked if they have any issue with us changing to this antenna type. They have approved that, and there's a copy of that letter in your packet about halfway through, saying that they approve of that change. Staff agrees. We think it is a good change. However, the only issue is that it will represent about a 2-month delay to get that different equipment ordered and get that different equipment on. I guess from staff's perspective is I would rather have a little bit of delay and make sure we get the right technology and we get the right infrastructure on those towers. So staff would recommend making that change to allow that CBRS equipment to be installed instead of the 5.8 antennas, unlicensed antennas that were originally proposed. Just to be clear, we have held up their ability to get building permits until we had assurance from the state and from this authority that we could make that change. So we didn't want to get the cart before the horse and start approving things and putting up, old equipment. We wanted to make sure everybody was on board and that we made all the appropriate changes to the agreements and the documents. And so that's what this is to officially request that change be allowed to be made to use the CBRS equipment on the antennas to build out the fixed wireless internet system. And so that doesn't require any additional county funding. It's really just a change in the equipment type that we're using. So I'll be happy to answer any questions on that if you have any additional questions.
Okay, we need a motion. for
I'll make a
item
motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Personally, I think it's from our beginning, we always had a question of whether we were getting a license frequency or not, and this answers our question. So all in favor, yes?
Yes.
Opposed? Item number 2 passes. We'll look at item number 3.
Okay, item number 3 is something that I mentioned earlier as well. With us using CARES funds to extend fiber to Scruggs and to Fork Mountain, that gives us a new source of internet service which doesn't have to come from this project. And so initially those projects or those sites were going to be served by microwave. So we had fiber to most every site except for Scruggs, Fork Mountain, and Henry. Now I think Henry is the only one, if I'm not mistaken, is the only one that's still on microwave just because of its location and its distance from any known fiber source. So we feel like we've made good changes there to get that more reliable fiber service to those structures. But what that has done is, again, it's kind of caused a need for a change in the contract to move where we originally showed we were putting microwave equipment on those structures to now show that those are fiber structures. And then what Body has approved this change as well, and they've allowed us to shift that funding from microwave equipment to CBRS equipment. In essence, instead of using all that funding for microwave, they said you can use $166,500 of that funding to help offset the cost of the CBRS equipment. And so under the Body, there's no change in the funding amount. There's no change in any of the things there. It's really just allowing a shift of dollars from one equipment type to another equipment type. And so same for us here. There is no additional cost to the county. There's no additional funding required. Just allows for that modification of changing those two sites from microwave to fiber. And so I'll be happy to answer any questions related to that you might have. And again, Body has also approved that change as well.
Okay. I need a motion for item number.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
No.
Aye.
All opposed? Item number 3 is passed, and we'll look at item number 4.
Okay, and item number 4 is really related to the overall project schedule. So in our original contract with Bristnet and Blue Ridge Towers, we had a schedule outlined, a project outline, which showed that some of these co-locations like Grassy Hill, Summit View Business Park, some of those would actually be on air at the end of this year. With the change of the equipment, they haven't been able to move forward with that, and so now with awaiting the ordering and the delivery of those, they've requested a 2-month extension on that to change the schedule, basically move the schedule out 2 months to allow that additional time to get that new equipment ordered, get it on site, and get it installed. With the changes that you made earlier to allow us to change that, we can now go ahead and process the building permits and get all those things ready. So as the equipment's being ordered and delivered, they can have everything ready and in place to install once the equipment arrives on site. So roughly, it's a little hard to read on the schedule, but basically that last column is what you're looking at, and it's basically basically a 2-month extension on the completion of those items, and that's primarily due to this change in the equipment.
Yeah, I can vouch for them on this. I have had 2 to 3 month delays on materials for my business as well, so I'll make a motion to approve this one too, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor of item number 4, aye.
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 Opposed? Item number 4 passes, and we'll move to item number 5.
Okay, item number 5 has to deal with that Callaway issue that was mentioned earlier. The initial environmental work identified a potential conflict or potential issue with the Pamunkey tribe on the adjoining property. What is being requested is a change order for $3,500 to do an additional visual effects evaluation report and to identify whether or not the consultant and the FCC believe that there is any negative impact. There may be additional steps beyond that, as were mentioned earlier, in dealing with the Pamunkey tribe specifically. But I think staff's recommendation is we move forward with this initial step to do kind of an additional environmental analysis, and then we kind of see where we're at that point, if we need to go further with the tribe to come to some sort of solution, or potentially we need to just look for a different site. But I think at this point, it's prudent to take the kind of this first initial step to do a little more analysis, submit that to the FCC, and kind of then see what the feedback is and where we are at that point. Identify, financially, maybe it's better to go this way or go that way, looking at a different site or staying on this site. So I think it's a little too early to really address all of that at this point until we do this first step. So staff is recommending that we approve the $3,500 for the additional environmental assessment to go to FCC. We'll come back after that and identify if we need to take a different direction or what step might be needed after that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sandy, I just want to make sure I'm clear. When Mr. Smith was presenting relative to this topic, I believe that he said that it might just come down to them wanting some allocation of funding for preservation purposes. So is that going on parallel to the analysis? Is the analysis and the evaluation still necessary if that's a parallel issue?
The analysis is a step to get us to the resolution.
Okay, okay, all right.
Step 1 was doing the application and sending out the letters to the tribes. And step 2, now that we've got the response and we have some negative objection from Pamunkey, the step 2 is this study. And that study will either qualify or disqualify their allegations that we're having an impact.
Okay,
And once that's complete, if it's found that we do have an impact, then we get into the mediation process. And what we're being told by our consultants is typically it's near a $12,000 to $15,000 donation to the tribe for their preservation.
thank you. I just needed some clarity. Thank you.
Okay.
And so, as we did in number 1, staff would recommend approval of this and that we take that cost from contingencies and be reimbursed, the county be reimbursed for that cost through the contingencies in the body grant.
And that
Okay.
3,500 is coming from the contingency again? Did I hear you?
We would pay it initially, but we would get reimbursed from the VADI program out of that $219,000 or $220,000 that we set aside for contingencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
want some-
initially, we would pay it, but then we'd get reimbursed for the full amount.
I want some internet from my citizens up there, so I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve, a second. We have a second from Mr. Thompson. And all in favor of item number 5, aye.
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 Opposed? No. Okay, 1 no. Item number 5 passes. And we'll go on to item number 6.
Okay, and the final item, final change order item is a request from BRT and Bristnet relative to bonding requirement for the tower structures. And so I'll give you a little bit of background and a little bit of my understanding of the contractual obligations involved here. We do have the county attorney here, and we actually are blessed with 2 county attorneys. There's one by phone and one in person. Mr. Lockaby, who does a lot of the broadband work for the county attorney's office, is on the telephone line as well. And so we've had a lot of conversations about this this particular item. And so I'll try to be as concise as possible, but also kind of describe, I think, where we are. So the waiver, there is a request that we waive a requirement that the tower itself, the material, the structure itself, that it be bonded as part of the construction contract. And so it's the county's position that under the PPEA contract and the PPEA regulations, that any of the materials necessary for the contract, construction contract, also have to be bonded as part of the construction contract. Blue Ridge Towers would request that that item not be bonded and that we waive that requirement, that their contractor waive that. And I think part of the reason, and I included a copy in your packet there, part of the reason is that Blue Ridge Towers has a history working with their tower distributor, purchasing towers directly from them. They get a preferred price, and they get, I don't know if it would be expedited shipping, but as kind of a preferred customer, they expect not to have as much delay getting those towers ordered and delivered for the project. If they, and Anthony might want to add more to this, but I think their position is if the contractor has to purchase the towers and then bond those towers under his contract, it's going to increase cost for those towers, and it's going to increase the delivery time. So it's going to set us back on 4 sites, which would be Callaway, Glade Hill, Fork Mountain, and Henry, if they have to bond it, in their opinion. And so, again, our position at the county has been, well, this is part of the contract requirement, and it's really part of the PPEA regulations at the state level, that these materials that are part of the construction contract have to be bonded. And so from the county's point of view, we want to make sure that those structures are adequately guaranteed through some sort of some form of surety. And so I think that we're really kind of down to 2 options. One is the contractor needs to bond these, needs to include that in their construction contract, or the other possibility is that the county itself has to go out and procure these towers themselves, order them, get them delivered to the county, and then we are in control of those towers, and those towers are the property of the county. And so that's a possibility, but that also represents a time delay, and potentially, we don't know what the cost would look like, as we'd probably have to competitively bid those structures. So we're kind of, I don't want to call it an impasse, but we're kind of at an issue where we need to come to some resolution of how do we get these 4 towers adequately bonded and guaranteed for the county, and also meet the appropriate PPEA requirements. And so I don't know if Mr. Gwynn or Mike, if you're on the phone, if you want to add anything additional to that. It really comes down to, it's not a bond issue itself necessarily, as it's the DPOR licensure. So it's a licensed contractor that has to have this included in his bond, and their license, BRT, Blue Ridge Towers, is not a licensed contractor. However, their contractor who's doing the work is a licensed contractor by the state. And so we would ask that, we've requested that their contractor be the one that bond these towers as part of their construction contract. And so, again, going back to the original request, Blue Ridge Towers is asking for a waiver to that requirement. I guess legally, I'm not sure that we can actually necessarily waive that requirement, but there may be some ways that we can, accomplish that and give the county the insurance, if I put that in quotes, insurance or assurance that those structures are properly bonded. And because at the end, those towers are going to become property of ours, and those towers are being paid for by grant funding, and so they need to be guaranteed in some way through the process. And so,
Steve, this is Mike.
okay.
May I butt in, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, hold on just a second. Let's see if we can get your volume increased, Mike.
What's that?
We're trying to increase your volume just a little bit.
Keep talking.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep, that's better.
What I wanted to kind of fill in here is where the real gap is that we have to be consistent with how we enforce these construction contract and license regulations across the board. If Lockerbie and Sandy real estate came into the building office and asked for a construction building permit for our little commercial office building that we're developing over near Westlake, and said, we have a construction manager that's not a licensed contractor who we're having manage this, and then he's going to go have a contract with a licensed contractor who we actually want on the building permit. And then we said, oh yeah, and the person who's the building manager or the development manager is going to go buy all the materials for us. The building official would have a problem with that because procuring the materials for direct incorporation into construction is itself construction. He would want it to be under somebody's bonded, licensed with DPOR construction license. Or alternatively, Sandy and Lockerbie, as the owners of the property, we could buy it directly and then have our development manager go and get the construction contractor to install it. So those are kind of the two things. You can't have that construction manager in the middle be the person who's doing construction if they aren't themselves licensed. And so our concern is to be consistent. We can't kind of wink at our contractor doing, or at our developer doing something that wouldn't be okay for any old, Class C contractor to do. So that's kind of the impetus for wanting to be clear about this. Now, there's two different ways, as Mr. Sandy said, of going about this. And the first one is it can be part of a construction contract under the license of a licensed contractor. And under the PPEA agreement, that is construction activity, which therefore must be bonded by the construction contractor. And Blue Ridge Tower, as the developer, who's kind of in between us managing the project and that contractor, has to then make sure that that contractor has the appropriate bonds. Alternatively, we, as the owner, could go acquire this. And I think that this really just came up through confusion in the middle of doing this, because Blue Ridge Tower is usually the owner, which means they can do that direct purchase because they're sitting in the spot where right here the authority is sitting. So they fall under that exception to the regulations where the owner can buy the materials himself without being licensed. So we've just had a little bit of confusion, and I think we're trying to work that out right now.
Steve, if I could, you feel me? So, Mike, this is Anthony Smith speaking. Actually, probably would be beyond my authority to say we could actually probably pull this out of an item to be voted on because we've already remedied it in our house. I think we've turned over 3 bond packages from our general contractor DNR, and we've already ordered out of our own pocket the first 3 towers. But we have provided so I want to be clear, getting the bond is not the issue. We were under the impression that we would be able to order not all the materials, just the tower, that we would order the towers ourselves because our general contractor, just doesn't have those relationships and those price points that we have. And so after we signed the contract a month or so later, when we were preparing to order the towers, our attorneys, and I think Mr. Lockerbie and Mr. Sandy informed us that the way the contract was written, that we wouldn't be able to do business as usual, which is us purchasing the towers directly. So we went round and around with our general contractor and his bonding agency to find out what they needed to get the towers bonded. We have worked that out with them. And what was the critical issue was a slowdown. His bonding and a surety company, of course, it needs the tower construction has to be under contract, and the purchase of that tower has to be in that contract and under his bond. And the original way that our relationship was with our contractor, he did not take into consideration buying the towers nor bonding the towers. So it came with a cost increase to us. And I think that's truly what got the conversation started between us and Steve, was saying, hey, Steve, can we go ahead and purchase the towers? Because if our contractor purchases them, the bond requirement will be higher on his side, as well as the lead time for the towers, and we'll have to create a relationship between the GC and the tower vendors. And it's not just one tower vendor. We have, probably 7 different people that we buy towers from. But we at BRT have already kind of worked it out in-house, and we've gotten our general contractor familiar with what he needs to do to get these towers purchased. So at this point, we're okay with kind of dropping this matter because the workaround is going to cost the project more time than it's worth. And so we just had to increase our cost our contractor increased his cost to us, and we're just working with him on that. So that's where I am, Mike. On our side of the fence, we heard your position loud and clear several weeks ago, and went to work to get our general contractor to understand that bonding the towers would be a part of his responsibility. So I don't know if anyone has any questions of me.
So, having heard that, I think this item can be withdrawn, I think is what I'm understanding, is that the waiver that was originally requested is no longer being requested. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Okay.
Is Mr. Lockerbie, are we all on the same page?
Mike, did you hear that?
I'm sorry, ma'am, I was muted for a moment. Can you repeat the question?
I
No,
think
I
she-
just want to make sure that you heard Mr. Smith's request to withdraw this item, and that we're good to go from your perspective.
I did hear that, and yeah, I'm glad that worked out that way. Certainly, it was something that Mr. Sandy and I are definitely eager to work through, and I'm glad that it was that easy. But I want everybody to understand we're willing to work through these issues. Confusing things come through and come up in these situations all the time. So, are there any other questions you all would like me to give whatever thoughts I have on?
I'm assuming then that we're okay.
Yeah, I think that's the final item. We would just withdraw
Just-
item 6, and I think that's all the items I had to bring before the authority today, unless somebody has some additional questions. I think we'll have a short break before you open up your regular board meeting.
Madam Clerk, will you make a note that it's withdrawn with the?
Yes, sir. I've done that.
Artie, thank you. Mr. Sandy, we thank you. Mr. Smith, thank you. And the rest of your party, we certainly appreciate y'all's attendance and your information. So we thank you, and
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll recess until our regular board meeting.